Can you hear my dog snoring in the background? I feel like it's very loud.
No, I can't at all. I think we should be live now. Yep, we're all live now. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining in today. I have Briohny Doyle who's joining us. So, she's an author of the novel The Island Will Sink and the memoir Adult Fantasy. Her fiction, poetry, and essays have appeared in The Monthly, Meanjin, Overland, The Griffiths Review, The Good Weekend, The Guardian, and The Sunday Times. And she performed at the Sydney Festival and Museum of Contemporary Art, Sydney. She is a lecturer in writing and literature at Deakin University and a 2020 Fulbright scholar. So Echolalia is her latest novel. Just want to show it here so people can see it. A lovely bright cover. So thanks so much for joining us. Just wondered if you might want to tell us a little bit about your book, or maybe you've got, I think you wanted to do a reading for us, which would be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I can't see who's here, which is kind of disconcerting, but like it's very nice. It's very nice to be here. Echolalia is a novel about a family and a town in crisis. It's set in two different periods, 15 years apart, before and after a really violent event destroys this kind of prominent family that are living in a rural centre, so a little Australian city that is based roughly on a city that I grew up in. And the city is very much, it worships its colonial history, but it's also racked by drought and kind of has to reckon with some of the futures and challenges of climate crisis. The protagonist is Emma. She was very young when she got married, and part of the reason for that was that she just wasn't quite sure who she was yet, and people were pushing at her. And so she finds herself when, you know, a kind of a hot like man about town from a wealthy family takes a shine to her. She finds herself ensnared in a family that have kind of moral implications that she becomes less and less comfortable with. She has 3 children quite quickly, and then she sadly gets very, very depressed, has postnatal depression, signs of postnatal depression, but is in a situation where it's kind of not okay to not be okay. And a lot of the story is about the co-responsibility we have toward each other, toward environments, and toward the future, what kind of legacy that we are engendering with our interactions with one another. Yeah, so I guess the book kind of unfolds in before and after sections set in this 15-year period, and it changes in perspective from a few key actors or characters in the book, including Emma, her husband's really kind of nefarious brother, the matriarch of her husband's family, Pat Cormack, and her daughter, Clem, who is just a little kid when we meet her, and then is a young woman kind of reckoning with the violence and the shattering consequences of what's happened in her family. So yeah, it's a character-driven novel. It doesn't shy away from tough questions about who we are in Australia, the kinds of things that we do, our colonial history, the kinds of stories that we tell ourselves in order to feel like, you know, we're on struggle street and we're the good guys, all of that kind of stuff. It's politically engaged as a novel, and there's been some like nice press about it being dark, but that, you know, you shouldn't shy away from that. I haven't, even though in a lot of ways, because it's a novel that features violence, you know, there's kind of a trend at the moment, right, where people are like, oh God, I can't cope with violence at the moment. I can't cope with looking at things, you know, in a more probing and less glittery way. But actually the feedback that I've been getting is that it's engaging at that level of character. So you're turning the pages quickly, you're interested. And I also think, I don't know, I don't know where everyone who is watching it where they're at with their stages of lockdown, but I feel now like I kind of can't have any more beach reads. I feel like I need to get
Yeah.
I need to be fully engaged, and I need to reckon with some of the tough questions that underpin the situation that we're in now and the situation that we're going into in the future. So I guess, should I read some of it, Jack?
That would be great. Thanks.
Cool.
Can I just mention as well before you start reading it that we do have quite a few people watching, and I just want to say to the people watching that if they ask a question during the Facebook Live, they'll have a chance to win a copy of Echolalia thanks to Penguin. So just type any comments and any questions and comments, and I'll read them out.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit from the start. It's not the very start of the novel. The very start of the novel shows us the crime that's taken place, but I'm actually going to start with Emma, where she is when she's beginning to reckon with her life. So this is chapter 2, Before. From her salmon-coloured entertainer's patio, Emma stared out across the dry lake bed. A group of figures in bright lycra bounced along the bordering track. They'd assumed an unconsciously balletic formation, the woman in the centre pushing a stroller, her 4 friends forming an arrow tip around her, their arms bent and hinged as they pumped the air emphatically. The mother, Emma presumed the stroller woman took that title, had some sort of aerobic attachment on her pram, allowing her to pump her arms too. The whole group marched in step, a satellite circumnavigating the dusty terrain. Emma eyed that orbit for some time. The lake was a sundial, tracking her own malaise. It should have been autumn, but summer held the town under indefinite arrest. What used to be a glistening circle of water stretched out just across the road in acres of scrub that turned gradually to marsh. The lake, smaller since last spring, was dwindling to a slick disc on the horizon. Heat made the flat pan shimmery, unreal. Air had texture out there, heavy somehow, as though you could climb through it into another world. Common wisdom insisted weather was temporary, subject to the wills of some petulant other. The phrase, pray for rain, was used ubiquitously by Shorehaven residents, secular and denominational, particularly on those muggy summer days that promised to leak into something cleansing, but by evening became only pink, placid. Men in thongs strutted around Westlake Estate with open beer cans, tossed crushed empties into piles beside the overflowing bins. People left their air conditioners on all night, rendering the drought a theoretical space to pass through but never inhabit. Even last winter, brutally cold, with winds that struck out across the water, had yielded mostly sleet that melted into long, thin puddles for the odd remaining duck to shake its wings in, never enough to make the lake again. The lake was field, no, too verdant. The lake was dried up paddock. Should I read more? Is that enough?
No, yeah, that's great. But if you want to read more, feel free.
I don't know how long people talk before people ask questions. So I'm happy to read more. I'm happy to fill questions if you.
Yeah, I've got some questions, but maybe if you want to read some more after, then that will be good. We'll see how we go. Patricia said she loves the title and wonders where it came from.
Yeah, so I'm glad you love the title. Thanks, Patricia. It's divisive. So echolalia is a term in speech development. It's when kids repeat what you say back to you. So I might say, this is a book, and they might say, this is a book. And it can be various stages. It can be echolalia that's kind of compulsive and nonsensical, or it can be a way to learn language. And it's part of what people look for when they look for developing autism in kids, or whether they're kind of rating that autism scale in kids.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't even know. Yeah, never heard of it before.
So Emma's middle child, Arthur, who's the child that she becomes fiercely protective of, shows signs of autism when he's very young. And the family, who are not okay with anything being anything other than normal as they see it, are constantly monitoring him, and that makes her really fiercely protective of him. But also I wanted to play with this idea of echolalia as repetition to learn, that we're repeating things to learn, but that there's got to be something in between there where you repeat it and then you recognize what it means, and then you have the ability to change it and to respond to it.
Yeah. Patricia also wonders where you came up with the idea for the novel.
So I read an article that I then could never find again before I started planning the book about a young woman in the town where I grew up until I was a early adolescent, who had harmed her child. She was quite young, and she had 3 children, and they were all under 5, and one of them had specific developmental challenges. And I just remember thinking how tragic and how intense that she was so unsupported that she not only had the time and space to do this, but that she was pushed to those limits. And I just really wanted to explore that and the way that those kind of things are represented in the media and in culture as well.
Yeah, okay, that's it. Yeah. Sarah Joy, she wonders, because of what you said about the name of your title, and that if you have a background in speech therapy.
No, I don't have a background in speech therapy. No, I don't. I just did a lot of research.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just a writer.
And sorry, who was it? Jill mentions about your cover. So the cover's pretty stunning.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? You can echo it.
Yeah. She wonders if you had anything to do with the design of your cover.
Oh, no. The designer, well, they gave me several versions of this to have a look at, but, it's such a beautiful cover. It was kind of a no-brainer. I have, usually you get a few different kinds of looks or concepts to go through, but this one was always this like repetitions of the title and repetitions of the sun, giving it that kind of scorched out look. There was some ones that were a bit darker looking.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice and bright, isn't it? And stands out easily on the shelf. Patricia wonders if you've always wanted to write.
I think I always wanted to tell stories, but when I was a kid, I found, because I hadn't learned to write, I found the idea of having to write kind of annoying. I remember saying to my mum that I wanted to be a storyteller, and she was like, "That's a writer," and I was like, "No, I don't want to write. That just seems like hard work."
Yeah.
And I wasn't wrong. I was probably a toddler who was onto something. But yeah, I've always been really attracted to that, though in different modes. There's been different things that I've done along the way. But certainly, yeah, I've always read voraciously. And wanted to write as well.
Yeah. And how did you go about getting your first book published? Was that something you found hard or easy?
Yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard. So my first book, The Island Will Sink, I wrote in my early 20s, just after I'd finished university, and I did study creative writing and cultural studies. And so I wrote that book, and then I shopped it around and nobody wanted it, and so I put it in a drawer and didn't think about it for a very long time, and went and did a PhD and worked on jobs and did all the things that one does. And then after I finished my PhD, I came back and I sat down and was like, all right, I'm going to have one last go at this book that's been sitting there for what was then a decade, and see if I can fix it, and if not, I'm just going to push it to the side and, I don't know, work out if I can write something else or if I'm even cut out for this. And I sat down and fixed it, and then I sent it out, and it actually got accepted by places that had rejected it previously. So it turned out that I just needed to learn and do that hard apprenticeship of writing, where it's like patience, study, accepting failure.
Yeah. So was it changed quite a lot from your original?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was hugely changed. It certainly wasn't changed hugely thematically, but it was definitely, I had solved some of the issues to do with the action and the characterization in the novel, because I had gotten 10 years older and both more and less ambitious, So I guess like people who are listening, watching on Facebook Live, people who are writing, I just think don't totally give up on that novel, but put it down for a little while when you reach your wit's end.
Yeah.
I mean, all of you who write probably know that feeling of looking at your work and being like, oh, this is terrible, it's never going to go anywhere. Just put it aside till you've got enough objectivity to actually see where you can take it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and we do have a lot of writers in our group as well, so that's good. Patricia, sorry, Jill's wondering what you like to read yourself, and I'm wondering if maybe there's something you've read lately you want to recommend to us.
So I go through stages of what I like to read. I like to read a lot of or especially when I was leading up to write to this book, I like to read a lot of kind of climate fiction. So I really loved James Bradley's Clade. I really loved The Glad Shout. I really loved the Barbara Kingsolver novel, Flight Behaviour. But recently I've been reading a lot of autofiction, and I just recently read... I read the new Rachel Cusk, which is excellent. The new Deborah Levi Real Estate, which I think was really excellent as well. And a novel called Based on a True Story by Delphine D. something, Vonyu or something like that, which I thought was just so excellent in kind of... I'm interested in books at the moment that critique or represent women writing and as a specific category.
And Belinda's wondering if you're writing something new at the moment.
I am. I'm writing autofiction, which is why I'm reading autofiction. So I don't know, like we're all locked down. I had plans to write this novel about, it was like a big sprawling cli-fi about extinction, and it was half set in Kenya, and there was a lot of things in it. And I think, nothing like spending 200 days inside to feel like you've kind of lost a little bit of touch with like rhinos in Kenya. So now I'm writing autofiction about grief and co-responsibility. Some of the themes that are in all of my books,
Okay. And Sharon's wondering if you began writing poetry first, or it's just a branch of one of your writing styles.
So I guess when I was a very newbie emerging writer, I wrote whatever I thought anyone would engage with. So like my early poetry was all like spoken word performed poetry, because at that time, which is like the early 2000s, that was where I could get up, read something and have a response, a really direct response. I was a teenager, I made zines and wrote short stories and published them in a place like VoiceWorks, something like that. And so I guess like, my mission as a writer has generally been to write the things that I think that I can find an audience for, to stay true to my own voice and my own themes and ideas and lines of inquiry, but to do so in a mode where I actually think that somebody will read it. And that's been a good way to go for me, because it's, as a lot of you who are writers will know, it feels like you're writing in a vacuum sometimes, right? Like, you're begging your best friend or your mum or your sister to read something for you. And it's so nice when you can actually, someone will read your work or look at your work and engage with it and say, yeah, that's great, or no, that needs heaps of work, or whatever it is. And I think that was the ongoing apprenticeship for me.
Yeah. And are you someone who likes to share your work with someone else as you're going along?
Yeah, but I hated the feeling of begging people to read when you're getting to the point where you're writing books, like with my first novel, for instance, I kind of felt like, oh God, I'm asking people to read these 300 pages and, are they any good? And it's such a big favor and all of that kind of stuff. I love sharing shorter works with people, and I love having an editor read the work and make it better. Of course, absolutely. But I've got to say, like, now that I have an agent, I wonder if she's here. Hi, Rach, if you're here. But that's such a wonderful feeling, because I can give her drafts and she can be enthusiastic with me and things feel a little bit more collaborative, which is amazing.
And you're a lecturer in writing and literature. Is that your background, the study that you did before you wrote your books, or?
Yeah, so I did cultural studies and creative writing at UTS, and now I teach in literary studies and creative writing at Deakin. They were quite different degrees, but they're in the same thing for sure. But I don't think that I don't know if this question is from somebody who's thinking about academia. I don't necessarily think that having gone through the experience of one degree led to teaching in the other. I think that it's being a writer that led me back to the institution.
Yeah, okay. And could you tell us a little bit about what sort of research you did for Echolalia?
Yeah, sure. So I had to do a lot of research into post-traumatic stress disorder. I had to do a lot of research into postnatal depression and postnatal psychosis. I had to do a lot of research into, or I didn't have to, I did do a lot of research into representations of infanticide, both in literature and in the media. And also my book is set in 2 different times. So I had to do a lot of research around the socio-political background of that time, one of which is in the past, so that was quite easy to do. And then the other one is just a little tiny bit into the future. And so that was thinking about and speculating from the moment that I was writing. And I started writing this book in 2018.
Mm-hmm. And Patricia's wondering if you read your reviews.
Yeah, I do. I read the reviews for this one anyway, because there wasn't that many of them to read. I try and stay away from Goodreads and whatnot. But like, part of being a writer is opening up a conversation. And I don't necessarily write books for people just to love them. I feel like if I wanted people to love me, I could have chosen a way better way to make that happen. I think my book, I want to see what kind of conversation that my books start. And I am really happy with the conversation that Echolalia has started. It seems to be a conversation about Australia and about social identity, rather than a conversation about what can and can't be represented, which I think is cool.
Yeah. And how have you gone about promoting Echolalia during, like, when there has been a lot of lockdowns and things like that?
Yeah, it's been tough and weird. I don't think I haven't done any live events, which is strange. My first book, we've launched it in every capital city in Australia. It felt like, the Melbourne Writers Festival obviously just pulled the pin. I'm supposed to be in Canberra right now, actually, but I'm not in Canberra. So, yeah, like there's a lot of that kind of stuff that is disappointing as a writer, because you work so hard on something and then you want to share it with people in real time. But what's cool about this online stuff is that anyone from anywhere at any point can do it, and they can do it in between putting the kids to bed and walking the dog or finishing their homework or whatever. So I think that's quite nice. But there is a kind of an echoey feeling sometimes in that digital realm, which can be difficult to break through. A really sad thing for me was that there were big posters for Echolalia, which is a bit of a big deal moment for me. But I didn't get to see any of them. But I do have lots of nice photos of people in other places standing in front of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, the great thing with groups like us is that you can reach so many people from different countries and that as well.
Yeah, great.
And it's good for readers as well, because we don't have to go out and try and travel out to see you as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about things like writers' festivals is it's nice that everyone gathers together, but also people can't always go to those places.
Yeah. And Patricia wonders if you have a strict writing regime.
I try to, but I adjust it for like what is happening in my life and in the world. So I try and write for an hour and a half a day. That's my minimum full stop. And anything above that is a bonus when I'm working on a project, in any case. If I'm writing to a deadline and writing an essay, obviously I have to write for longer and in shorter bursts. But with a longer project, I'm writing for at least an hour and a half a day. If I find that I can't write for longer than that, I don't flog myself, I just give myself a pat on the back and move on. One of the most useful things that anyone ever said to me is you've got to take the in-breath before you take the out-breath, and sitting in front of a word processor, forcing yourself to make judgments and make words is not always the best way to make literature. So, I found that works for me. And actually, weirdly, like an hour and a half doesn't seem like very much time. But if you actually turn off all the distractions for 2 blocks of 45 minutes, quite a lot of work gets done. It always amazes me.
Yeah. And Sharon's wondering if you connect with other Australian authors and if there's like an author community where you share your skills and knowledge.
Yeah, so I guess that's one of the things that universities really have given me. So I went to a university in Sydney that's quite well known for its creative writing program, and I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I met on the very first writing workshop day, and a lot of them are published authors now. And also, I guess that's the thing that writers' festivals and teaching and all of those kind of things do in Australia. So I do have quite a lot of friends that are writers. I'm always really excited to read their books. I'm in a book club with, or I was before I left Melbourne, I was in a book club with a bunch of other writers, and it was really fun to read books with writers. I think that that's something that, you know, you can really get from a university creative writing degree, is a coterie of people who are really interested in the same sorts of work, or in different sorts of work, but are interested in the same sort of creative labor that you are.
Yeah. And I'm interested, when you first start writing your book, do you know how it's going to end?
Usually, I did. Well, it just depends. So with Echolalia, I didn't know exactly how it would end, but because it kind of starts with the end, I knew what the catalyzing incident was, and I knew that it would come around to a moment of either forgiveness or the impossibility of forgiveness. With my first book, I also kind of knew how it would end, but I didn't know all the things that would happen in between. The book that I'm writing at the moment, I have no idea at all, and it is a crazy loose feeling. Like, it's just, I don't even know, but it's kind of, I wanted to create some looseness in my practice, because I feel like too much rigidity around story can I don't know, stymie you long term creatively, or I was maybe feeling a little bit agitated, and maybe that's just a symptom of lockdown. But I don't know where it's going, so I think you can do it either way.
Yeah. And how far along are you with the book you're writing now?
Just the beginnings. Yeah.
So will that be out like later, the end of next year, or probably longer?
I hope so. I mean, I love that, but I don't think, one of the things about book writing is that you write your draft and then it goes through several redrafts with editors. And then, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a publisher ahead of time, you kind of have to slot into their publication timeline. So they decide where to put you in relation to a whole bunch of stuff you know nothing about, you know, when other books are coming out, when they've got the time and space for you. So I have no idea. My previous books have taken longer to write. This is the first time that I've been writing, and I've had a publisher that will read my work. I know that my publisher will read my work. Doesn't mean that they have to publish it. But I know that they want to publish my next book. So that's a wonderful kind of milestone to hit.
Yeah. And Sharon's got a really interesting question. So she's a teacher, and she says that, I think she's a primary school teacher, Sharon, and she says that when she's teaching the kids to write, they tell them to really plan out their writing. However, a lot of authors, that's not how they do it.
Yeah.
So
but when you, I don't know. Really, I bet there's like some really interesting pedagogical theory around learning to write, and I think like if it depends what form you're writing in as well. And I guess like primary school kids, they're writing little short stories or whatever. You want them to learn narrative structure, right? You want them to learn beginning, middle, and end. When I sit down to write a book, usually I free fall into the start of it, and I maybe write the first couple of chapters. Then I'm like, okay, who are the characters? And I tend to spend lots of time writing outside the text and writing the characters so that I know them inside out. And then I start plotting scenes, and then eventually I'll like make a, you know, chapters board of like so that I know what I have to do next and what the basic structure of it is. So I guess that, like you need to know story structure before you can break it up into those component parts. As a teacher of creative writing at university, sometimes I note that some of my students who are in their early 20s mostly, I guess, they still have some of the tics that they picked up and that I remember picking up from primary school, like, never use the word said more than once. Like you should say exclaimed, rebutted, you know, all of these things. And I have to say to them, when you were in primary school, you were being taught that so that you could extend your vocabulary. Now you have that vocabulary and you can choose when to use it. So I guess like with primary school teaching story structure, it's like when you were in primary school, you had to plot it out so that you would know that there was a story there, as opposed to just an account. You know, little kids will be like, and then we were at the show, and then I bought a show bag, and then I went on a ride, and then I did this, and that's not actually a story. And then later, you know, when you understand what story structure is, you can start to be a bit more freeform and loose with it.
Yeah, no, that's really great, sharing that. Sharon has now also said she does find, though, that the kids tend to never stick to their plan and always write something different.
Isn't that always the way? And maybe that's the thing as well, like have a plan, but be willing to like throw it to the wind when it seems appropriate and when you get carried away.
Yeah. I'm wondering what you hope readers will love about your book.
I hope that readers really engage with the characters and the characters' moral dilemmas and the characters' points of view. They're not lovable characters. I haven't tried to write a book where you're really rooting for anyone. They're very, very human, and I hope that readers can relate and also critique each of those characters.
And could you tell us, for you, what you think makes a good story?
That's a really good question. All the things. I mean, I love a good setting, and I actually think that we probably don't talk about setting enough, right?
Yeah.
Like I love a setting that is like you're there with the characters, with the story. But every this is like a Tolstoy thing, isn't it? Every good story is good in its own way. Every bad story is bad in exactly the same way. Like a bad story is something that has no specificity, and a good story is something that is so alive and specific and relatable and says something really important about the world.
And Jill wonders if you have a favourite character in your latest novel.
Yeah, I like Izzy because Izzy was, I guess, she's the lightest character, and she was the easiest for me to write. Conversely, I also love Shane, who's the most dastardly of the characters, and so in some ways was also the funnest to write. But you know, the funny thing about this, well, funny is not the right word, but the odd thing about this from a writer's perspective is that all these characters that I was spending so much time with, sometimes I was just like, oh, like I hate you, but I'm so compelled by you as well. And I have a lot of empathy for all of them, you know, even in their worst moments.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us today. It's been great chatting to you. And thanks to everyone who joined in, and we had some really great questions.
Thanks, everyone. I can't say hi.
Just wondered if you wanted to let people know how they can keep in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Briohny Doyle, and same Instagram at Briohny.Doyle. So yeah, I'm on both those platforms and easy to contact. And Jackie said that I could log back into the Facebook page, so I'm happy to do that and field some questions if you have some quick questions or long questions. I don't want long questions either. After the fact, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Oh, right. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to looking out for some more of your books.
Oh, thank you so much. Last time we do this.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.